Yeah, how did he go from this to that?
I'll fucking suck your dick!
I think many of us were disappointed with the finale of The Boys. There's a scene in The Boys Season 1 finale that I keep coming back to. Homelander infiltrates a terrorist base in Syria. Almost nothing is visible. Then, out of the darkness, he appears and starts killing the terrorists one by one. All around is darkness and two red glowing lasers from his eyes, slicing people in half. He smiles. Every kill brings him pleasure. He doesn't care about anyone's life. He doesn't need to prove anything. Homelander is here for one reason only, because he enjoys it. And throughout that entire scene, there's only one thing we feel: fear. He is terrifying. That's the Homelander we've been missing for a long time. 5 seasons later, that same character is on his knees in the Oval Office, begging Butcher on a live stream not to kill him, willing to do anything just to survive. The question isn't only whether the finale was disappointing. A lot of people feel that it was, and the audience reaction speaks for itself. The real question is, how did we get from that first scene to this one? And why does it feel like two completely different shows? So, why did this happen? The Boys started as a satire of corporate power. The premise was sharp. What if superheroes were a product? What if the Avengers were just a PR campaign run by a corporation that didn't care about casualties as long as the brand kept making money? That was genuine, incisive commentary. But somewhere around Season 4, the focus started to shift. And with it, so did Homelander. In the beginning, Homelander wasn't just a villain. He was a person who wanted something very simple: to be loved. Not by crowds, not by millions of fans, by someone specific: a mother, a partner, a father. That's why he first sought a mother figure in Madeline Stillwell, then a wife figure in Stormfront, then a father figure in Soldier Boy. It was all the same need, playing out in different forms. He didn't want to be worshipped. He wanted someone, anyone, to genuinely love him. To see him not as a weapon, but as a person. Not as a symbol, but as an individual. That's what made him tragic. That's what made him more than just a monster. But then the writers, and Eric Kripke in particular, began steering the character in a completely different direction. From a mature, terrifying, self-assured villain, Homelander gradually became a child who needs to prove himself to everyone, which was never his original motivation at all. In the early seasons, he didn't despise people because they didn't love him. It was the opposite. He despised them because they needed him, because they worshipped him, because they handed him responsibility for their lives. In their world, there was no one else who could save them from a threat. Only Homelander. Without him, they were helpless. And Homelander hated that quality in people, hated their fragility, hated how much they valued their own lives. Because they were weak, because they were not his equals. He could dispose of anyone who lied to him or feared him, even if that person mattered to him deeply. Even Madeline Stillwell, the closest thing to real affection he had ever experienced. And yet, tellingly, after all of Soldier Boy's humiliations, he never truly fought back. The only time he tried to choke him was when Soldier Boy showed him a glimpse of real care, and then turned to leave. So the problem with late season Homelander isn't that he became weaker. The problem is where they were taking him as a character. After Season 3, Homelander effectively takes control of Vought. He has power over the largest company in the world. Everyone around him is afraid. No one can oppose him. No one can just walk away. The logic of the character points to one obvious next step. We know what Homelander is capable of. We know people can't stop him. We know he keeps expanding his reach. And that's exactly what created the tension. We were waiting for the moment he'd finally snap, cross the line, start taking power by force, and stop pretending. The show's creators themselves promised us scorched earth. That's the reason the show continued after Season 3. But instead, something strange happens. Just when Homelander has shed almost every limitation, when no one around him is capable of controlling him anymore, Sister Sage appears. And the man who used to pull off the most complex political manipulations on his own now suddenly needs the guidance of the smartest person in the world. Even though we've already seen what he's capable of, we saw how he and Black Noir spread Compound V around the world to create the threat of super terrorists and get supers admitted into the US military. We saw how he turned the Flight 37 disaster, which he himself caused, into a political tool to advance his own agenda. This was a man who knew how to think 3 moves ahead. So why would he need someone like Sister Sage at all? At this point, he should have just moved forward. Kill, seize power, crush the institutions, bury anyone in his way. But instead, Homelander is once again under someone else's control, following someone else's plan. And that's what disappoints. Not because he became less violent, but because the most powerful superhero in the world keeps behaving as if he can't do anything with his own power. And this is where we come back to how the show itself changed. Somewhere around season 4, coinciding with Trump's return to American politics, Homelander stopped being a symbol of unchecked corporate power. He started becoming a more and more direct caricature of Donald Trump. And once that happened, the writing started following a different set of rules. Not the rules of the character, but the rules of a political symbol. Eric Kripke has never hidden his political views. But for the show, it meant Homelander could no longer be the frightening character he once was. He had to become ridiculous. He had to become something to be mocked. Because that's what the message demanded. At some point, the character who was conceived as Superman's dark mirror, the embodiment of what happens when a psychopath gets absolute power, started turning into a caricature of a specific politician.
We've been making the point all along that you take away Homelander's powers and he's the softest, wettest boy, in Soldier Boy's words. And the truth is he's a coward and has a glass jaw and is as weak as they come. And we wanted to demonstrate that. And by the way, like, he's not the first strong man who, once you take away their power, figuratively or literally, immediately become blubbering cowards, because most of those guys are cowards.
There's something important worth remembering. The Boys was never just about Homelander. The actual premise was about ordinary people. No powers, no money, no resources, trying to hold an elite above them accountable. The Boys weren't heroes. They were people with personal damage, their own motivations, and desperate plans going up against a system designed to destroy them. That imbalance was the engine of the show. In Season 1, you genuinely believed any of them could die at any moment. There was no plot armor, no sense of safety. Over 5 seasons, that eroded. Butcher became effectively superhuman not once, but twice. Kimiko acquired Soldier Boy's chest blast in the final episode, an ability that appeared from nowhere and conveniently resolved the final fight. Missions started going too smoothly. The sense of danger was gone. And then came the ending. Homelander dies. Fine. But Vought is still standing. The system that created him is still running. Superheroes are still a corporate product. Nothing structural has changed. The show started as a critique of a system and ended as a story about defeating one villain within that system and calling it done. Which is why the way the show handles Butcher's argument is especially strange to me. His position is framed as the villain's stance. But if you actually think about it, Butcher wasn't trying to commit absolute evil. He was trying to commit necessary evil. He was willing to sacrifice thousands of supers to protect billions of ordinary people, to create a world where people are on equal footing again, a world where no one has to live with the thought that the person next to them could tear them apart at any moment simply because they felt like it. You can disagree with his method. You can call it monstrous. But the problem is that the show barely challenges his arguments on their actual merits. Huey says no, and that's treated as the morally correct choice. But the world doesn't actually change as a result. At one point, Eric Kripke was asked directly, "Did you ever think about letting Butcher win?"
What Butcher wants to do with releasing the virus is a very valid thing. And I'll bet you a lot of the audience, because he's right. The fact is, that's the only way to stop another Homelander. So did you ever think or debate with the writers, maybe we want Butcher to win?
No, because ultimately he's talking about murdering thousands of innocent people. If another Homelander emerges, they'll deal with it. Life goes on.
And that, I think, is the central problem with the ending. The most dangerous being on the planet can appear again at any moment. The system that created him is still in place. The causes of the conflict haven't gone anywhere. But the show's moral compass tells us, it's fine, we'll deal with it. The core problem with the ending is that it changes nothing. The world is essentially the same as it was before the finale. The system keeps running, the causes of the conflict remain. Even after Homelander's death, there's no sense that the heroes actually accomplish something. What should the ending have been? I've thought about this, and I keep coming back to two alternative endings this story could have had. The first is the version where Homelander wins. People and supers alike are unable to stop him, and everything that happens is the result of their own mistakes and inaction. They gave in to the propaganda. They let the system exist. In this version, Homelander takes everything and gradually begins to dominate and destroy the world around him. That ending would mirror our reality well, where people often can't fight the machinery of power, and at the same time choose to let it happen because they think it doesn't concern them. In some ways, that would have been the most honest, most uncompromising ending, though the show's format and budget probably couldn't have pulled it off. And then there's the other version. In this one, Homelander is still killed, as in the real finale. But the story doesn't end there. The boys continue their fight, not against him, but against the system itself. Vought collapses, superheroes are banned in the wake of everything Homelander did, and all Compound V research is destroyed. But sometime later, a new form of superheroes appears, a new version of the same idea, and that would show the real point. Corporations don't disappear, they adapt. Their only goal is profit, and they will always find a replacement for the old tool. It would also be the logical payoff to Stan Edgar's foreshadowing, when he told MM that after superheroes, corporations would come up with something new to keep feeding the machine. The Boys, at its best, was one of the most interesting things on television. It had a villain who genuinely terrified, a premise with real teeth, something true to say about power, accountability, and what happens when a system is built to protect itself. That show exists in the first 3 seasons. It's worth watching and rewatching. What happened in 4 and 5 is a lesson in what occurs when the message starts mattering more than the story. When a writer's personal frustrations begin overriding the internal logic of a world that took years to build. When a character stops being a character and becomes a political instrument.